All right, so first we're going to open up Canva and do create a new design. Make sure you default from pixels to inches. And I'm using 13 by 14.5 because I'm using 13 by 19 paper. However, my heat press is only a 15 by 15. So I don't want it to go over that 15 platen. So just if you're using a bigger heat press, then you can use a longer height. And now the first thing I do is I upload all of my photos that I'm going to use inside of Canva already. Now you'll see me struggle with this a little bit because I did have a separate folder, which you'll see me do or grab it from later on in the video. That honestly seems to work better if you're going to upload them all at one time like this. And then also the ones that I did, they didn't have they had a background and they were blurry. So I was like, oh. So I had to go and re-download them again. So just make sure when you remove the background or the images you use are very clear and they go along with your theme as well. So I will say the first part of this is really, really easy. The front part of the pillow. The back can be a little bit tedious, especially with the numbers and the letters. But as time progresses, you'll just knock it right out of the park. There isn't a baseline for how big or small something should be. I honestly kind of eyeball it, but if I had to guess, for the back, I would say we're going to keep it about 4 to 5 inches, but we will get there. And this is me, y'all, still putting pictures inside of Canva. All right, next we are going to duplicate the pages, or in this case, duplicate because they're both white. One is going to be labeled our front of our pillow, and then the other is going to represent the back of the pillow. Now, this step is not necessary, but it does help to keep me organized. So this may work for you as well, but I just erase the front and back when I am done designing. And I did have a little bit of difficulty. My computer was freezing a little bit. I think I may have too much on my desktop. So you'll see it stick just a little, but nothing that's too annoying. All right, so to go along with the theme, I'm thinking of doing purple polka dots and then possibly some stripes behind it. So I'm just inside of elements here, and I'm going to search polka dot or purple polka dots and see what exactly comes up. And I'm like, oh, wait, I need a space in between polka and dot, and then it'll bring up more. That first one for me was too realistic, and since this is a cartoon character, it was cute, but it wasn't. So I decided to go with one that was slightly bigger, and then I was going to add the stripes at the bottom. Now, while still inside of elements, I'm going to search for stripe. This was much easier than creating my own. So here I am just sizing it to where I want it to be. However, what bothered me about this was the actual being able to see the purple polka dots from through it. So now I am in the color selection and I'm playing around with the shade of purple. So I just clicked on it, and wherever it highlights, that'll let me know right next to edit image. That is where you change the color selection for you to change the color. And this is me realizing that, yeah, I was going to try to put them together and then it was too bunched to try to alleviate me having to put maybe a white box in the background. But yeah, this didn't work. So I went back and I resized it back to what it was. And I went back to elements and I grabbed a square. And I went to the color selection tool and I turned that square white. And then I placed that square behind the stripes, but in front of the polka dots because I didn't want them to be see-through or be seen. There we go. Play on my position up there. And then I was pleased with that. All right, so let's go back over to uploads. I'm grabbing a Mcstuffins Bandage. I found this from Google and I did some edits inside of Photoshop, but there are other blank ones that are out there just on Google for free. And I'm just sizing it to my liking and putting it in a position kind of where it covers that space between the stripe and the polka dot. And I'm just putting it wherever I feel it looks nice. And the font that I'm going to be using for the name today is actually going to be, I believe it's KBA Stitch in Time. That looks very, very close to the actual Doc McStuffins logo. And I found that from defont.com. So you'll see me use that in just a few. I also took some of those clip arts from Google. So everything I'm using came from Google. And I'm just positioning them using the wheel on the side there to turn them sideways. I mean, this isn't necessary, but it just kind of made the theme pop a lot more to me. And this is something you can do too with yours. And then I'm just sizing them down. I don't have a rhyme or reason. I'm just making sure it looks okay to me. I kind of just eyeball everything, to be honest. But you really don't want things on close to the edges or the corners, because sometimes it may, depending on your press or your method, if you don't apply enough pressure, it may not press all the way. And I'll show you guys that a little bit later. You might get some areas where it may ghost a little bit or shift. So this is where I'm using that KBA Stitch in Time font. And I'm going to go up to that A there. And I'm going to change the color to that tealish, bluish color. I believe something a little bit lighter than that, because that first one was just a bit too dark. And I'm just zooming in to make it easier to see. Now, at some point in this tutorial, I had the bright idea to like, oh, let's add silver glitter. This was a bad idea, or maybe I just couldn't find one that I liked, or pink glitter. It was something about it, and it did not work for me. But you'll guys see me go through and struggle a little bit. I just didn't like how it looked, so I actually did not use it at all. And then now that I'm almost satisfied with it after failing at this glitter attempt, I'm just going to go ahead and erase the word front. And then that'll just represent me being finished with the front of the pillow. Front is very easy. The front is always going to be the easiest. The back is going to be the challenge a little bit. All right, so now we're going to go to Google and I'm putting in Doc McStuffins backgrounds. You can also try wallpapers to see what come up. And I'm going to use this image for the back of the pillow because I really want the theme to be noticeable. It doesn't have to overpower it, but I do want it to be, in the background. I did save two different designs because Canva is proportionate only. So if you don't use the correct format or it's not proportionate, when you go to blow it up, sometimes you'll lose certain elements and it may have been something you wanted to keep from the original photos. So I saved two just in case. All right, so here I'm testing to see which background I want to use. And I'm like, I don't even like this one. So I went with the one with the house. Let's go ahead and blow it up to the front. I'm like, okay, this is fine. I'm not losing much. Thought about keeping it cropped, but I'm like, nah, we'll go all the way because I might be able to fit it all. I was more so concerned about keeping the house. So this was a thumbs up for me, and I'm going to move on to these numbers. Now, these numbers, you want to make sure they are completely transparent. These numbers also came from Google. And what I'm doing is I'm sizing them down all to the same height, just to make sure that they're around about the same. Now, you will see me move and play around with these numbers, y'all, a lot, because sometimes with that Band-Aid, it's at the top, it's at the bottom, it's on the side, and the height may or may not be the same. So numbers wise. So you kind of have to eyeball it sometimes. And then you'll also see me play around with the spacing of it. So you'll see it'll give me that purple box, and you'll be able to tell how close it is to each other. Now, if you don't want to be this detailed, this is not necessary. You can use the text and then just type out the numbers. Just do them all in a straight line. But because I just wanted to have the entire Doc McStuffins theme, yeah, this took quite a while. I can honestly say out of the whole tutorial, this right here probably took me about maybe 10 to 15 minutes just on this with the sizing and the positioning of them. So you'll see me play around with this quite a bit. Now, after you spend 35 years trying to size your numbers, you're going to go back to elements, and we need to find underneath lines and shapes, you can use this rounded square, and I'm going to turn it into a rounded rectangle. And I'm going to place this behind the numbers so that it can be seen and not really blend in. Now, sometimes your background won't make it difficult to read, but I just figure these are children, so I want to make it as easy for them as possible. So again, make sure you're very aware of your sides. You don't want to design or have your design running to the edge of the actual template. You kind of want to leave yourself some room. So I just clicked on the color there to change it to a purple. And then I also played around with the position of this to make sure it was fitting correctly. And if during this process, I did group all of them together. So if you just hit shift, and then when you hit shift, select each one, you're going to hit group. And that'll allow you to size them all together. And then when you're done, you can either ungroup them, but this is so much easier to group them together and move them versus doing it one by one. But I group after I get my sizes together. So I hope that helps. And that's in the upper right-hand corner by share. Now, this is a cheat way. I honestly go to Google and I type in kindergarten flashcards. That seems to bring up the most. And I'm using a Mac computer, so I honestly just slide the images right onto my desktop or into a folder. Now, if you're using an HP or a Windows computer, this is just something that came from Etsy. So I'm just showing you, if you right click and then hit save image, it does just the same. And then I just get these. I mean, if it's one with shapes that I want and it doesn't have any kind of watermarks, it is free game to me. So I slide it into either a folder, the desktop, and you can always put kindergarten flashcards, kindergarten colors, kindergarten matching, kindergarten body parts, flashcards. You just kind of got to get creative. And here I'm looking for days of the week flashcards because I didn't see any. And there are a few in here as well, so I'm just going to do the same thing. Couldn't use this one, unfortunately, because it was like an actual picture frame, but I sure can use this one here. So I'm going to slide it and then upload it inside Canva. So at this point here, I am going to attempt to grab Miss Doc Mcstuffins and kind of place her by the house. But I didn't, I found out later on in the tutorial that this really didn't work. It was cute, but there was a lot that was going to be missing, and there was a few things that I like to incorporate. So I was like, yeah, we'll try this again. Okie dokie, so now we are going to elements again, and I'm using that same rounded corners rectangle, and or square, and I'm going to position it to where I want it to be, and I'm going to use this for the alphabet. And again, this is just eyeballing it, see how much space I have, not designing to the edge as well. And then I'm grabbing all of my PNGs for the colors, the shapes, the days of the week, and I'm going to place them where I want it to be. I do like to make sure that they are aligned. So if you look at the upper right hand corner, it says position, and you can always position it by grabbing or pressing shift on the two that you want. If you can't see it, but Canva does pretty decent at actually letting you know. You'll see those purple lines, and I'll let you know if it's lined correctly or if it's aligned. So now with the days of the week, it is like turned sideways. So I'm going to use that little turny thing there, the circle. And I'm just going to turn it the correct way or upright and then size that according. And this is where I noticed that Doc McStuffins is in my way. So you'll see me begin to move her and then play around with the positioning. You just don't want them to be too small because remember, this is only 13 by like 14 and a half. And the smaller you make it, it may make it a little bit harder for them to actually point and touch. So keep that in mind where you're making it, is for them to point and touch. You want it to be that big, not too small. And then we're going to move on to our rounded square here. This is where I'm going to put the alphabet in it. Now, this may take a little bit of time or patience and practice. Typically, sometimes I will use a color, but I knew I wanted to use maybe like pink. I didn't want to do the teal again. So I needed to have like a solid color. And then the font that I'm using is the KBA Stitch in Time. I was like, oh, maybe polka dots will look nice, and I quickly abandoned that idea. So I'm heading to text to add a heading, and I'm just going to type out the alphabet first, size them, and then I realized here, don't do this. You don't need to space them. So I was like, yep, bad idea. Don't space them. Just type them out. So at this point, I thought about adding a square to the background, like to give it a double kind of effect. I decided to, in the end, not to do this, but this would be pretty cool if you guys wanted to. So basically, it's just taking the same little rounded corner square there, making it smaller, and either applying it to the front or the back. I just didn't like how that looked, so I did abandon this. But I'm going to go up to the color selection there, and I'm going to play around with the colors, but that didn't work for me, but this is how it's done. All right, so now I am going to my uploads and I'm going to start just grabbing some of those cute little clip arts and placing them where I feel like they would just look cute at. This also helps to fill up a lot of that space that's there. Now, I could have went ahead and made some of these bigger, but I didn't want to do that. I believe these are all about between 3 and 4.5 inches. So for me, that was perfectly fine. I didn't want to make them bigger to take up the background because you wouldn't have been able to see it. So I'm going to just start taking these and just adding little cute little elements to it to really bring in the theme a lot more. Not necessary, but it's extra. So now all we have to do is go ahead and hit share, and we're going to download. I always download everything as a PNG because it does have a higher resolution. And then next, for part 2, we are going to insert this into Microsoft Word. I don't print directly from Canva because I did notice a color variation. So I go right into Microsoft Word, I print, and then we stuff it and we're good to go.